So maybe you're just at the start of your transition, or maybe even well into your transition. You might be wondering, what do I do next? Maybe you want to do it all at once because, understandably, you don't want to wait any longer for the rest of your life to begin. But let's take a moment why it's important to think of transition as something like a marathon rather than a sprint. And some things that you may find hopefully helpful in embracing things like patience and planning on your journey towards being your most authentic self. Way back in the day, I was on track, but I never did anything like a marathon, and doing one sounds outright exhausting. But I'm using that metaphor to emphasize that pacing yourself is important in transition, just as it is in a race or really anything else in life. So that way you don't become immediately overwhelmed or tired out or burnt out. I also realize very much from personal experience that trying to be patient, at least at the very beginning of transition, can be quite difficult, and it's a very big ask for somebody. I'm thinking back to my early days of transition in 2014 and 2015. Yeah, it hasn't been that long. I was starting to embrace that I'm trans and embracing the idea that living my life as a woman is something that is actually possible. It was all scary, but it was also new and exciting. I wanted everything to change as soon as possible, in terms of being accepted by others, living as myself more and more each and every day, changing my wardrobe, going through the process of medical transition like hormones and planning out future surgeries, and so much more. But realistically, these things unfortunately don't change overnight, especially not the long, gradual process of things like the physical changes from hormone therapy. Logically, I knew that it would take time to really unpack all of these pieces of who I am, figuring out my needs and desires for transitioning and planning these things out. But emotionally, I wanted to wave that magic wand and just have all the changes there the next day when I woke up in the morning. But let's be honest, if that was possible, someone would have granted my countless wishes to be a woman well before transitioning. So you may be wondering, how can I possibly be patient after being in the closet for 2, 3, 4, or maybe even more decades? Why do I have to wait any longer? And clarification here, I'm not saying that you should keep prolonging your transition if you're at a point where you feel that you're ready to start or continue your journey. I'm saying that you don't have to and shouldn't try to do everything all at once. I've mentioned in the past that it's important to take transition one step at a time, especially if you're early out, taking baby steps. Every single step you take, no matter how small, towards being yourself is a huge accomplishment. Transitioning to live your life as another gender, as your true gender, that is a big undertaking. It's extremely worth it, as I've said countless times, and I'll probably continue to say in so many of my future videos. But it's also new, and it's also scary. It's anxiety-provoking, it's stressful. You're finally taking these steps towards living as your authentic self. This is one of the big reasons why it's so important to take those small steps, especially when you're first starting out in your transition, so that you don't get overwhelmed by all of the changes at once, by all of the new and scary things along with the rewarding things. The more things we try at once, the greater of a likelihood we will fall and the harder we'll fall. And the harder we fall, the more difficult it can be to pick ourselves up and keep going on our journeys. And sure, that probably sounds super cheesy, like thinking of like a cheesy 80s movie where people are fighting and getting knocked down and it's like, you gotta get back up. But in some ways it kind of is like that. If you push yourself too hard, you'll be too exhausted and overwhelmed and you might want to give up. And I don't want that to happen to anyone. As you're taking these baby steps, find at least one special supportive person who can not only take those steps with you, but can also be there to pick you up and pick up the pieces on those days and those experiences where things are especially tough. Said so many times before that having a supportive person is important. But I emphasize that point because of how much of a difference it has made in my life personally, and I've seen that make such a huge difference in so many other people's lives, their coming out journeys, their transitions. Having that person or people that can be there to get you through those tough times so you can really start living the life you want to live. Life has setbacks, and so does transition, because gender transition is part of our lives. But pacing out your journey and having that support team there for that ride makes any setbacks you may experience so much more manageable. But let's go back to that marathon metaphor for a minute. Or maybe it's a simile. Nah, who fucking cares? You get my point. Analogy, metaphor, simile, whatever the fuck it is. A marathon, and really any exercise technique, also takes practice and training. You work yourself up to it. You build up strength, you build up endurance over time, and you can gradually take on more and more as you build up this strength and endurance. Think of transition like this in some ways. The first time you do anything, especially firsts in your transition, firsts as you're going out in the world as a trans person, it can be especially and exceptionally difficult and stressful. But the more you do these things, the easier it gets. In terms of transition, I'm talking about things like going out in public as yourself, especially those first few times. It gets easier every time, especially if you have people there to support you, who can, at the very least, distract you from some of the anxiety and stress you may be facing. Things like going to work for the first time as you, or shopping for a new wardrobe, or putting on makeup for the first time, or figuring out your style. For me, a big one was also just gradually gaining comfort simply existing out in the world as a woman after forcibly trying to live as a boy or man for 24 years. It was awkward and unfamiliar at first, to put it lightly, but it got easier and more comfortable as time went on because this was part of who I am, and it just took time to build my confidence. And it's cheesy as hell to say, but practice makes perfect, or rather more accurately, practice builds comfort and confidence. I make that clarification because perfection is non-existent bullshit, and aspiring for perfection is always a letdown because it's impossible to achieve the constantly moving target of perfection. But on that note, find the pieces that come to you naturally. Find the pieces that make you, you. Find what it means to be you on a personal level. Find what it means to identify as a woman if you're a trans woman. Find what it means to identify as a man if you're a trans man. Or non-binary if an identity under the non-binary umbrella feels like that fits best for you. Find what that means to you on a personal level and aspire to that. Try to resist that urge to force your transition path to look like someone else's if that path does not work for you. Even from what I've shared in all of my videos, take what works for you and leave behind the pieces that don't fit and pave your own path for your own unique journey. Trying to force pieces that don't fit just creates more stress, disappointment, maybe even dysphoria, and so much more negative crap. Just think of how prior to transition, we forced ourselves to live as a gender not aligned with who we are, and think about how well that worked out. It's not going to work out well if we again try to force ourselves to be someone we're not. Being yourself, taking baby steps, finding support, practice and building confidence over time, do all of these things. In addition to planning out what may be important to you in terms of your personal transition needs, and your journey will likely be more manageable and also more fulfilling. Remember, you don't have to do it all at once. The pieces do gradually fall into place over time, and living as yourself does get better and easier with each day that you're doing it. I'll go ahead and end this one here and turn it over to all of you. What are your thoughts and reactions on treating transition like a gradual process, maybe even like a marathon rather than a sprint, but hopefully more rewarding than exhausting? Although accomplishing a marathon is considered to be a big accomplishment for a lot of people who are into that. How have you paced your transition journey up to this point? What has helped make your journey, your personal journey, more manageable and more fulfilling? Let me know all of these things and more down in the comments below. And as always, Little Miss Tipsy and I love you all and hope that you're staying happy and healthy and as safe as possible during these tough times. If you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. I love you all. Bye for now.